for the busy parents. So we're trying to find, the reason why we're focusing on hacks is because we're trying to find quick and easy ways to boost our kids' motivation. And just right off the bat, I'm wondering if you can relate to, wanting your children to be more motivated in some part of the day, whether it is to get out the door on time or to do their chores or to do some of that summer work as you're kind of ramping up, getting ready for the school year. Maybe it's even motivating them to, behave better. So whatever it is for you, I just really want to know. Can you please put it in the comments? Let me know, first of all, where you're tuning in from. So for me, I'd say El Cerrito, California. The ages of your kids, I've got 22 and 26-year-old stepchildren, a 7-year-old bonus child in my household. And then where would you love your child to exhibit more motivation, particularly the kind of motivation that doesn't require punishments or rewards or bribes or endless negotiations? Where are you finding yourself getting stuck and wishing there was more motivation? And even if it's not that completely stuck feeling, but you just get a sense of like, my child's really pulling away from this activity and kind of avoiding these kinds of things. And I would just really love for them to feel more motivated and maybe even more empowered. Because today I'm going to share my top tips about how to get your child more motivated to do things like help around the house or help towards a common goal, like having a good time at the restaurant for the first time being out in the pandemic with masks on, hopefully. Instead of maybe ignoring you or rolling their eyes or refusing. I also want to share some of my tips on how to tell whether or not, you should intervene and offer more support, or if you should step back and kind of let your child be more independent with tasks that maybe vary in how motivated they are to do them. And just a simple way to know like what your child can developmentally handle on their own versus, again, what they need help with. So when to kind of intervene, when to lean in, when to lean out. I know this is a struggle for a lot of the parents who find their way here in the Raising Our Resilience community, because what I found is that we are aspirational parents who want to be great parents, but more importantly, we want to have a great relationship with our children and empower them with wonderful life skills, such as being independent and having some initiative and some self-motivation in areas that we feel like they're really ready for. And making that distinction isn't always easy. If you can relate to that, let me know in the comments. Just say, yeah, like, I don't always know when to intervene. I don't always know when to sort of get in there and try to motivate them and, move things along or challenge them, and when to sort of kick back and see kind of how it goes on its own, on how things go on their own. If you can relate to that struggle, just let me know. Just maybe put the word balance in the chat like this. That way I have a sense of, if this is something you're struggling with too, always on these lives, or even if you're watching the recording, feel free to drop a question in. Some really smart parents did that last week, and I was able to have some dialogue with them even after we wrapped up that live. So always don't be shy. I even had somebody post up a post like, hey, I'm struggling with this. Anybody else have suggestions? Can I get a consultation here? I need help. You can always drop that into the Facebook group. So clicking on Raising Our Resilience Parent Group in the top and dropping a post in there, inviting friends. I know I just had some folks invited by one of our members, and kind of went through and found that blue invite button and invited a bunch of folks so they can join the conversation. I'm proud to say that we had over 200 parents and families join us this summer so far, wanting to create a community around raising resilient kids. And I'm very proud of that, and so inspired by each and every one of you who have decided to come and join us and hang out. Well, okay, so why is it 5 proven hacks? Well, when I was doing my research, I realized that, there's this overall philosophy of trying to help kids tap into like internal motivation, what we would call intrinsic motivation. And as a Montessori educator and as somebody with a history of a lot of external pressure on my motivation sort of mapping, I really wanted to, I was, very passionate about continuing to find ways to motivate kids from within. And that difference, right? So when a child just like kind of lights up and and digs into something because they find it fun or exciting, or maybe they feel like they have some determination to sort of learn a new skill. There's just this quality to that motivation that's just lights us up too, right? Like you feel like in the classroom, we used to call it like the engaged learner that was asking questions and, you know, really trying things for the first time or not giving up when it doesn't work out, those kinds of things. And so finding out is that, yes, you can have this overall philosophy and keep asking this question: how can I help my child be more internally motivated so that I don't have to use as many bribes, punishments, rewards, consequences, and go through all these negotiations? And that led me to the discovery of 5 research proven, in my research and in all of my colleagues' research that I've been studying under hundreds of research studies, 5 proven hacks we're going to be rolling through this month. Now, it's not the full form that you would get if you came to like about 30 parents did, our Family Foundation's Immersion 3-day Motivation Mastery Weekend, but we're going to dip in and give you some high-level tips that you can try out right away. So today I'm going to focus on 2 things out of a 5-part system, okay? And the model that we're looking at was developed through my research and also based on Angela Murray's work. I want to make sure to give a shout out to her. She's a powerful Montessori researcher and also Stanford researcher who really set the stage for all our studies on growth mindset, Dr. Carol Dweck. So I didn't want to leave them out of the conversation. But what we're going to be referring to is something that I'm really proud of putting together. And again, what we study in the immersion, which is this I care model. Now in the I care model, today we're going to be looking at I and C and just dipping in together, okay? But I wanted to kind of give you a sense of what the whole thing looks like. So I-C-A-R-E, I care is for interest, competence, autonomy, relatedness, and effort. And today we're going to dip into interest and competence. And how we're going to do that is we're going to be really thinking, we're going to be thinking about the question, how can I make this more interesting, right? How can I make this more interesting? Now, the reason why we ask this question is because every time we ask this question, kind of pose the question to our child or pose the question to the situation, to the community, we say things like, how can I make this more interesting? Or where do I feel this emotion in my body under the kind of the emotional mastery skills? Or is this true, or what else is true? Maybe in the conflict resolution side of things. So in the motivation piece, we're going to be asking key questions, and that's what I want you to mostly take away. So when you hear the question, write it in the comments so I know that you're here with me, and also so I can say hello. So this first key question, when we're looking at how do we tap into that internal motivation, the most natural thing to go with is with interest. How many of you seen a child just get totally engrossed in something they're really interested in, and you don't need to add any extra motivation? It's already there, right? So the key question I want you to write down is, how can we make this more interesting? And the reason we ask the question is so that after they hear us ask them, we ask ourselves this question. This is some high-level tips, friends. We role model being curious and wanting to, kind of unlock what could be interesting about this particular task or activity or whatever it is that you're trying to motivate to do. Then they start to ask that question of themselves. A really powerful strategy for helping shape sort of kids' cognitive tools and their self-management of like, if I need to do this thing, like it's my turn to do the dishes, or it's my turn to take out the trash, which some of my clients are working on right now with their tweens and their 8 to 10-year-olds, and even teenagers, or if it's even something of like, how can I brush my teeth where I'm not so scared and I can redirect my attention to what can be fun or interesting about this activity? Yeah. It could be for for toddlers and preschoolers who are maybe still struggling with toothbrushing. We can still ask the same question. How can we make this more interesting? And the word interesting gets to be many things, right? Interesting can be fun. So another variation of the question, and write down the one that you like, friends. Like don't don't be silent in these trainings, because you won't get as much out of them. I promise you that if you engage and do things like write in the comments, how could I make this more interesting? Or let us know that you're here and tuning in, and the ages of your kids, then I can serve you better in these trainings. So go ahead and put yourself into the training, friends. Okay. And I'm hoping that there's no issue with sound, that you can hear me, because I'm noticing that, oh, good, Maria can hear us. Okay, good. Yes, excellent. Wonderful. From Sweden. Hello, Maria. So good to have you. And so what I was asking you to do is pose the question, what could make this more interesting? So I'm going to write it, and I want you to write it too, because I want you this to kind of like almost etch into your mind. Because then you're going to be leading yourself down the road of one of the most powerful motivation hacks, which is that once humans have interest in something, they naturally put their energies towards it. Okay. Like, just think of even listening to music. Like, are you more likely to sing along if you're interested in the song, or kind of know something about the song, or are you more likely to sit back when you hear something that's not as interesting to you? It's just sort of natural. Our brains kind of track over to what we're interested in. It's very powerful. And we can hack it. I think that's the part that I've heard even parents get hung up on and say, oh, I can't really get into my child's world around video games because I just don't find them interesting. And then I always, with my clients who say something like that, or people who are new in my world, I would challenge you to say, that's actually a fixed mindset. You're deciding that there's nothing interesting about this, which is putting up a wall to what could be a motivation hack, which is asking the question, what could make this more interesting? So let's say you're not into the game aspect of the video game, but you could appreciate the art that is happening in the background of the game. Maybe the game itself is not interesting, but the decisions your child is making through the game, maybe even watching how they're learning to read things through the game prompts, right? Finding out that they know words that you didn't know they knew could be interesting. Asking them what their strategy is if it's an older child, right? Like, how are you approaching this differently than last time? And getting to hear your child's thoughts and perspective on the game or on the things that could be interesting. See, so we're hacking with the word interest, and kind of trying to shed our biases about what we find interesting and what we don't find interesting. A lot of us had locked in our preferences and our interests in our teen years, and we haven't adjusted very much, especially after age 28. We kind of say, that's not my thing. But the problem with that, not to say it's not a good foundation to build off of, but the problem with that is that our children are inevitably going to find different things interesting than us, or have a different pathway into what's interesting. Like some parents can't stand competition, but their kids thrive in it. They love, like, turn it into a game where we race to see who finishes first, or we see how many math problems we can get done on this page before the timer goes off. Or we try to beat our personal record, saying, well, last time, you got 6 done in 1 minute. I wonder if you could do 7. Like those kinds of interest hacks, turning it into a game, finding some aspect of it, to sort of geek out on a little bit, will absolutely not only bring in motivation, but it can also bring in a lot of bonding between you and your child. Because fun is bonding, right? You're laughing and having a good time. Like those are the kinds of people you would identify, kids and people that you also would identify as friends, like people that you could have fun with, people that know how to turn something into a game, and have a sense of how you like to have fun and play. So how could I make this more interesting is the key question, but then you can start to add in other words. How can I find some part of this interesting? Could be a way that you could hack with interest. So that's another variation. Write it in the comments if you hear one that you particularly like. Another one you could ask is, how could we make this more fun? Right? So then we start to lean into some of the ideas like turning it into a game, yeah, or even adding some element that gets your body involved, like playing some music. How many of you would rather have a little, play some music that you enjoy while you do an hour of housework, or a podcast, something in your earbuds that you get to like enjoy? I know that around here, like when we turn on music, when it's time to clear the table and do the dishes, it often segues straight into a dance party. And then basically we've warmed ourselves up into a fun evening activity and also got the chores done without any power struggles. I mean, sometimes it's a little bit like, I don't want to carry my dish. And you're like, well, actually, you don't have to carry the dish, your dish, but you could help with the chairs. You kind of move through it when you put on the music and be like, we're putting our chairs in. If it's a younger kid, you can kind of sing through it. They love it. And then when they start getting the eye rolling, you need to level up to maybe a more mature way of having fun, like trying to beat the timer. Kids from 6 to 12 especially can be really competitive, especially the 6 to 9. With things like that, like finding it fun to see, like find out how good they can be at something, or how quick, or how accurately they can do something, how many they can complete in an amount of time. I spent 10 years with 6 to 9-year-olds. You have to trust me when I say certain kids in that age range will eat that up from you if you bring it in. For the little ones, you can even ask them to show you how. That could make it interesting, and it can also build the next thing, which we're talking about today, C, competence. But there's a comment here I want to check in about. So Maria Hartsong is saying, I wonder how I can make it more interesting for my kids to be creative with other things than the iPad or computer, right? They do create amazing things like videos on TikTok and building things in games, but I would love for them to be offline and creative. Maria, I love it. So you can build some bridges between those worlds quite literally by purchasing or recreating something that's in the digital world in the analog world. So there's like a direct bridge. I remember when my son started getting into like Yu-Gi-Oh and Pokemon, and even though there were cards, he was also really into the video games. And one of the things we ended up doing was, those little like purling kind of projects. We started seeing like how many Pokemons we can make with these purling projects. And so it was still in their vein of interest. And then we even took pictures of them and posted them somewhere where it would get some recognition from some peers, and that felt really good to him. He also started making them for his friends and giving them as gifts. And that was really a great way to kind of bridge into something that's more hands-on and creative in the analog world. So I wonder what it would be in terms of, TikTok. I know that some folks also, instead of just being focused on the video aspect, like they'll take it into the public with TikTok, like they'll do, or meet up with friends and, even masked in a public area, it's sort of, what is it called? Dance mob, right? Like flash mob. They'll flash mob in a space and make a whole afternoon out of it. So they're having a lot more interaction than just what they're recording, because they need to practice to get the moves down, and then they eventually like do the one recording that they end up sharing. So that's kind of bridging directly from it. Now, another thing you can do is, so kind of borrow on game theory or borrow on social platform theory, which is really about having templates and tools that you can assemble pretty quickly. Like for TikTok, it's like adding a filter, right? Or picking a track and just recording over it. So a lot of times when we try to structure creative things in the analog world, we start with sort of a blank canvas. So couple things you could think about there is, getting something that's more structured at first, like a kit to build off of, and then asking them like, well, now that we've done that process one time through, like let's say it's a kit to create a puzzle or something, that you color the puzzle and now it's a puzzle, or some kind of model that you build. You could say, well, I wonder what else we could build. Like what would be really interesting to kind of create our own kit for. And if you do it really well, then you could also even repeat that. And because kids often like the idea of, like I said, giving a gift, if that's their love language, or giving a tutorial, right? And so if they're really into videos, one thing to tie it back to could be, there's a whole tutorial trend on TikTok right now, is have them like get a kit, create a thing, and then come up with, using that same process, another thing that could be made that hasn't been made before, and then they could do a TikTok about that. So you can see how you can kind of bridge back and forth between the digital and analog world. Maria, I love that you love these suggestions, and you're building off of their interests. You're starting where they are, and that can be really helpful when it comes to shifting things, whether it's making chores more interesting or getting them into more hands-on activities like Maria's asking for. And last thing I would say is that doing some kind of priming activity where you're doing something playful with curiosity and brainstorming, and you kind of are like trying to answer a little question. Like I had my community over the Motivation Mastery Weekend, which Maria, I know you really wanted to be at. I totally understand why you weren't there. Was giving them a piece of yarn and having them break out into breakout rooms and come up with as many ways as possible to use a piece of yarn. And they made these photo collages, and they were just so cool. I'll show you a couple of them. Just spontaneously here off of Maria's question, did such a good job sort of coming up with ways that we could, just sort of get that creative question, like query going, so that instead of starting from sort of scratch, because oftentimes when kids are on board, they're in a rut mentally, right? They're not necessarily in a brainstorming space, but we can actually do something called prime the pump. We can like prime our brain activity to be more of that sort of like fireworks of creativity and inspiration. It's totally possible. It's really exciting to be able to see that unfold. And I saw it unfold with my cohort during this. I'm going to pull it up. This Motivation Mastery Weekend, where I could tell, like, we rolled from that into this brainstorming activity into really talking about, what are some ways that we could bring this kind of energy, this kind of creativity, this collaboration, even this openness to new ideas into our lives with our kids. And the ideas were just flowing so well from there, largely because they had primed their own pump, right? And I'll show you what I mean by that in a second. So here, check this out. They were able to take the suggestion of come up with as many ways as you can to use a piece of yarn. You've got 15, 20 minutes and, create this, create a photo collage, and check out some of the things that they created. Here we go. Here's one. So a group came up with like all these different ways you could use yarn. And they kind of started with the obvious things like friendship bracelets and dream catchers, but then they moved on, and cat's cradle, moved on to things like gardening and, yarn bombing a tree, or even, using it in your hair, or creating pom-poms and using art, nails to create art. You can see how it just kept going here. Look at all the creativity that came through from them being curious and really taking the time to come up with a lot of fun ideas. And then one or two groups started to say, wait, but what about practical things like rope bridges and, climbing harnesses? Others were thinking about, well, what about mechanical uses, like on a pulley, and in machinery, right? Other ideas. People were really talking about, like, it's not that different from some other like long thin things. So we could think of it as, like, what if we wanted to create like a little yarn pile of spaghetti for a little scene that my kid wants to make, or create some really beautiful art. So they had all these insights from there about like, what are some like low stakes ways that we can get creative and kind of play with this concept of curiosity and interest, and then roll into how do we now move this into other spaces where their motivation is lacking. Oh, I'm so glad Patty's here. Hey, Patty. I know we have a conversation we still need to have. I'm so glad you're here. And anybody else who's here, say hello. Let us know you're here with us. Ages of your kids, where you're tuning in from. For me, I'm in El Cerrito, and I have 26, 22, and 7-year-olds in my life. And I know Patty's got a baby that's now a couple months old. So yeah, your son loving Pokemon, so you can shift him towards more of those analog ideas. If you caught that part, Patty, I think that might be what you're responding to. So good to have you here. Let us know how you're doing. We'd love an update. Patty came to our 6-day training in June while she was in the hospital because she'd already gone in labor. Like, she was so committed to getting these calm down strategies for her family. And yeah, continue to be impressed by you, Patty. So glad you're here. So that's in the interest space. So, listening to that, I'm wondering if anything stood out to you about ways that you could kind of open up the conversation to bringing in things that are more that would spark from a place of interest. A couple other ways to make it interesting would be to find out why something matters. Because oftentimes we don't realize that our children are not in touch with the reason behind a task or a reason behind an expectation. And so it can be actually very motivating for them to understand why we're asking for a thing. So for example, saying it's time, like we might go in and say, it's time to clean your room. We need to get, we need to pick up all the trash and throw it away. And the kid might be like, well, why today? Why right now? Like, why is this up to you? Right? How many of you have had that with something in your household? Yeah. But we could say instead, maybe at lunch or breakfast that day, say, hey, trash day is tomorrow. So I wonder what we might need to do. I wonder what we might need to do to make sure all the trash is at the curb by, 8 p.m. tonight. And you kind of basically get the understanding the reason why you're about to say, yeah, one thing that I know needs to happen is we all need to go into our rooms and make sure if there's any trash that's getting into the big can before we put the can out on the street, which just comes across really differently, like more like it's a team. How many of you have had to lead a team member or work on a team? It always helps to have some context to requests or demands, right? And so we often skip that step with our kids because we have this idea that they're younger, they're in this like kind of subordinate position, and they need to just listen to us when we ask for things. I don't want you to get stuck in the trap of always having to answer the question why when they already know why. That can be kind of tricky. But what I would like you to lean into is that maybe finding out why something matters or what difference it will make or what the context is could actually make them feel more interested, because then they're a little more on board with working towards a mutual goal, like getting all the trash out of the house, by 8 p.m. on Thursday night for Friday trash day, or making like it's getting stinky, right? So I had this one client who was I coached through this really intense power struggle they had where her teenager was saying, I don't want to do anything, no chores. And I was so proud of her for saying, it's enough is enough. It's finally time to address this. And I said, one of the things you're going to need to do with teens, especially in tweens or your precocious, mature young ones who are going to feel things like, well, why should I, is really talk to them about your reasons before you ask. So one of the things that she said to her child to her teen was, hey, it's honestly, it's to make so that your room isn't so stinky. Like it's pretty stinky. Like you walk by and it smells bad in there. And I know you spend a lot of time in there, and, it concerns me. Like, and I think that you too would probably like a room that smells good. So these two things I'm asking for, which is where she started, which is to bring your dirty dishes out of the room and put them in the sink or put them in the dishwasher, and pick up your laundry, dirty laundry, and put it down by the washer as a place to start with clean your room. Because before she would just say, why don't you clean your room? And the teen was like, you can't make me. And then she couldn't. Yeah. And so just kind of tapping into why it matters can also be another part of it. So the questions you can ask, right? What could make this more interesting? What part of this could I become interested in? Like Patty, what is it about Pokemon that you could get into? Even just one thing. Maybe it's the art, maybe it's getting to know all the names, maybe it's maybe you like organizing things, so learning the different classifications of Pokemon. Maybe it's just getting to witness your child like be joyful and interested in reading, trying to sound out words in the Pokemon, or like naming the pictures, since you have a 3-year-old, and maybe saying the beginning sounds of some of the pictures. I wonder if there's a way to kind of harness that interest and bring it to the front. The one other thing would be turn it in, how can we make this more fun? How can we turn this into a game? And then the last one would be, why does this matter? Have we tapped into the reason behind the task enough so that my child feels connected and invested in this task or in this activity? And then lastly, we talked about priming interest with maybe doing something creative like those collages, doing some brainstorming together, in something that's very low stakes, that maybe there is interest already. Yeah. And start, if you start with that and then roll into, well, what could make our morning routine more fun? Or what could make our transition between screen time to dinner, more interesting? So it doesn't feel like you're leaving something really interesting, which is your screen time, to doing something that feels really boring right now or annoying, which is, setting the table. What could we do? When you do that priming, it can really make a difference. So this is a great review for my clients who are at the Motivation Mastery Weekend and our handful of guests of what we went over in our session about this. So the next one I want to talk about is competence. But before we roll in there, I really do want some comments rolling in. So if you're watching the replay, just take a moment to pause, put something into the comments. I do this with my clients all the time. This is sort of a following through hack, which is also about motivation, which is pick one thing you're going to try next. Okay, put it in the comments. And then when you come back next week, you can report back, how did it go? So what's one thing you'd like to try from all those ideas that I just rolled out to you? Okay, so put it in the comments. What's one thing you want to try? And it can be as broad or specific as you want, but I'll tell you, the more specific you get, the more likely you're going to be able to picture it in your mind, and then you'll remember it to follow through on it and feel more confident when you're doing it. So for example, I think for me, motivation wise, I would like to add more music into my workout plans because I will move longer. I will move longer and I will be more creative in my movement if I have some dance element in there, some music. And so I know that's like a hack for me that will make it more interesting to play some music, not only in my workouts, but also on my walks when I walk my dog. That's an example. I think I could also turn it into a game to get some of my tasks done for the day. And have a nice little spot where I'm like crossing it out, and then I do something to celebrate at the end that makes it feel like I won, that feeling, you won a game, because I do like games, for example. So just kind of, play with that, put something in the comments, and then we can follow up with you. All right. Let me refresh this just in case. Remember it. I don't see. I would like to add more. Okay. And so competence, I'm going to put it into the comments. So the reason C for competence is because it helps spell I care, but it really is a key. So one of the things that can happen for kids is that if they don't feel competent, and all people, quite honestly, right? If you don't feel competent in a thing, in a task, in a skill, in some kind of request that someone's making, that would be a reason to pump the brakes and say, whoa, hey, I don't want to do this. And it's not always true that because somebody has done it before, that they are in the current state of being successful right now. So I've heard parents say, I don't understand why my kid won't do this on their own. I know they know how to do it. So it's not a matter of knowing how, they're just not properly motivated. Well, let's speak to that. Okay, because sometimes it's true that they have done it before and they do know how, but perhaps there's some little twist or some element here that is different. Like maybe, first of all, looking at addressing their underlying needs. Maybe they're tired, maybe they're hungry, maybe they're overwhelmed, maybe they're too hot, maybe they're too cold, maybe they've been angry and frustrated for hours, and this is just one more thing. So taking into consideration what's going on, in the hours and even days before this is arriving. But then also understanding that sometimes confidence is kind of fluid, right? There are high confidence moments and low confidence moments. And leaning into the fact that there will be times where they just want us to be there and support them side by side on a task. They want us to, maybe break things down into smaller steps. They would like for us to help them see that they're making progress on the first couple steps and get them rolling, especially if it's a bigger task that has multiple steps or is like a longer thing. Like for example, most 3-year-olds don't complete their morning routine on their own. They need more check-ins with us along the way. Patty knows what I'm talking about. 8 and 9-year-olds probably will have a hard time sitting down and writing a whole paper on their own. Yeah, like a whole long through multiple page story. 12 and 15-year-olds might have a hard time staying organized about their plan for the week, and making sure that they're bringing all the equipment they need each day for their after school activities or their hobbies or for their school projects and deadlines and homework. Those are things that Patty says, yep, right. So those are the kinds of things that, we want to like lean in and say, hey, like, could it be that they do really need some support here with their sort of skills? Is this something that maybe I could take some time out for training, break it down into smaller steps, and ask, like, help them identify what parts of it they still need to either learn or they still would like some support with. We as humans tend to kind of lump a thing together and say, like, do the whole thing, and forget that that can be overwhelming and that can be daunting, even discouraging. So some of the signs that this one would really work is if kids are doing things like they start something but don't complete it, so incompletion, copying instead of doing it on their own, or right, or hate this. Sometimes it goes pretty negative. So one of the things that you can do with competence, and this is the question I want you to ask again, so make sure you're writing the key questions into the comments, is what smaller steps can I break this down into, and where could I use some help? So what smaller steps could I break this down into, right? What smaller steps can I take? And what do I still need to learn or could use some help with? And just by, again, asking the question, helping them to ask themselves that question can be so wildly helpful, because what comes next then is that they can start where they are. And when they break it down into steps, they can do the ones they feel confident about and skillful in, but then get support with the ones that they feel less skillful in. And they would like to maybe have even some training or some instruction on how it works, for us to show them, do it side by side. And I think the difference between saying, oh, just let me do it, and offering support towards their growth and development is that showing, saying, hey, I see that you're struggling with this. Can I show you something? Or how can I help you get started? Yeah, so especially the ones who are pretty stubborn about doing it on their own, those are really great questions to ask. And the kids who are really hesitant to even get started. And I would say for kids who are showing a lot of hesitancy, I would say something like, hey, it's okay if you don't do it this time. I just really want you to watch how I do it so you can start to learn about it. Yeah, and maybe you can even be my helper. Yeah, so we're kind of doing this thing called scaffolding, where we like work up to the level where they are independent and they are, for example, Patty, able to do their whole morning routine on their own. And when we do that sort of stair stepping or scaffolding, it's really respectful. It makes them feel seen and understood, and helps us to be a little more flexible about where we'll meet them. And then we are looking, though, for them to put in a good foot forward, like to try, to try, or to at least pay attention. And you can be kind of have a hard line around that, saying, hey, I'm willing to do this for you, but you need to be right here paying attention. I need you to watch how I do it so you can learn how to, or this isn't happening. You can do that. It doesn't always have to be this giving into, like, if they're doing some sort of power play around it, you can still be firm. You're like, Vanessa, how do I do that? I'm like, I know, let's talk. Because there's all these different kinds of scenarios. Like, I can imagine you might have a few things and be like, but what about this? But what about that? If that's the case, we need to talk and get you on my calendar. So I can share a way that you can do that by taking a quiz and applying for a session. I like to share this because sometimes it gets lost in the Facebook group. It's kind of tricky to find sometimes. We'll see if it lets me post it. Sometimes it doesn't like it when I post a Google form, but we'll see what happens. Yeah, good, it worked. All right, so some other ways you can, in competence, besides meeting them where they are, breaking it down into smaller steps, asking the question, what steps do I need to take? Where could I get some support with us? Or what could I learn? What might be missing in terms of what I need to know or learn or be shown? And then you can actually get organized and make a plan. And when you do that, it can be such a relief. How many of you have like finally written out what it is that you want, like the steps of some kind of recipe or some kind of project, or, and then looked at it and then felt like, oh, I'm so glad, like it's kind of laid out here. I'm not just kind of frantically putting out fires. I know what my fires are, and I've even got this one broken down into several steps. Yeah, well, kids like that too. Not for everything, but just enough. So if we're giving a lot of verbal instruction and we're not sort of mapping it out in some sort of like visual way for them, it can be hard. So sometimes, and even a physical way, like I have literally laid out the steps to cleaning up. I'll put like a sprayer and a towel and then a sponge or whatever the order is, and say, okay, this goes first, then this, and laying it out so they can visualize it and kind of see the plan and feel organized, like, oh, and it also helps that now you have all the materials you need, like they're all ready, and then you start the project. I've had a lot of practice with this because running a classroom where I have 24 children to teach a process to, I better be organized and I better lay it out, especially for those visual tactile learners who, like, if I just give a verbal instruction, they will and say, okay, go. Like they'll sit there and go, wait, what am I doing? So tuning into your child's learning style can be really helpful here too. And the other, I would say in this one, that's so crucial that a lot of parents miss is modeling that you are still learning and growing too. Like being willing to show how you break things down into steps and tackle things one at a time, showing how you are still learning. Yeah. So one of the things, and this also kind of goes into the E for effort around growth mindset, but how it applies to competence is showing that it's okay to not know how or to need support and help, and that the process of learning can actually be enjoyable, and it doesn't have to come with a lot of heaviness and criticism of not being further along. I have a coach in my world who said, really, Vanessa, what's interesting about what you're saying is, like, I was kind of down about not knowing how to do a thing, something with a new platform that I'm trying out technology wise, which is not my area of expertise. And she goes, well, first of all, it kind of sounds like you have this belief that you shouldn't already know how to do this, and you're being a little hard on yourself. So, it's a good thing to check in about if you're doing that. And then the other side of it is believing that you'll never learn how to do it, and that it's not a learnable skill. For example, being patient. Turns out it's absolutely a learnable skill. Your capacity for patience, trust me, you can develop and grow, because I had a quick lid when I was younger, and early in my career with children and early in my parenting. And now I'm sort of, one of my hallmarks and what I'm kind of known for is having a lot of calm and patience that I bring to crisis or difficult situations. And I said that was a learned skill. Like, I was not a patient child or a patient person by nature. So you can even learn some of these personal characteristics as well, these you can build your character. So what I would challenge you to do in the comments right now is pick one thing that you could model in front of your children that you're still building up your competence in. You could break down into smaller steps and celebrate your wins along the way. Either, rein in that criticism that you don't already know how and you should know how, or boost your confidence around, like, oh, this is something that I actually could learn and grow. Like, I had one parent decide that they were going to learn an instrument alongside their child, same instrument actually, so that when it was time to practice, they could practice together, or they could start practicing, and then their child could see, like, oh yeah, the practice. And it just made it so much more comfortable for everyone to sort of get motivated and figure it out together how to get motivated. Like, okay, what if we set a timer for 15 minutes and then we take a 5-minute dance break and then we come back and do another 15? Or, what if you and I get to do something special together after this? Hacking into different love languages, which is another training. So let me know in the comments what it is you got out of this for interest and competence. I'm so curious. Remembering to ask the question, how can I break this down into smaller steps? what do I still need to learn? And especially picking one thing that you could do, just one thing that you could do um, in front of your kids where you practice the breaking it down into steps and being open to learning a new skill or, accepting support and help. Would be my last piece for you, action step for next week. Next week, we're going to go into the third one, A for autonomy, just one. I kind of kicked us off with two big ones right away, interest and competence, because those of you who showed up, I just wanted you to have something you could use right away. Maria is saying that for the interest piece, she's going to try motivating her 13-year-old to bring down dishes, trash, and dirty laundry instead of just the general cleaning his room. Good. And also wanting to try a dance party tidying up in the kitchen. I feel like you've got a great plan, Maria. I'm so excited to see how it goes. Make sure you come back next week. And for those of you listening to the replay or here, we're going to be having this series for the next three Mondays at 2 p.m. Pacific as well, rolling through the 5 strategies. So good to have you all here. Patty, Maria, who said hello, so glad you did. Anyone else listening, make sure you say hello so I know who's here and I can continue to get to know you. And it's my honor to get to know you and your family and your goals, your struggles, your dreams, and be here for that as we all raise our resilience. And because it takes a village of resilient parents to raise resilient children. Firmly believe that. And you never have to do it alone. So come on back. See you next time. And I'll also have a special announcement about a special event next week that you won't want to miss. So I'll see you next time, everybody. Lots of love to you. Take care. Dana, yes, they do. They do work for a 5-year-old, 100%. So good to see you here. I know Tiffany brought you in. So fun to get to know you too. Dana, if you have more questions, let me know. Okay. All right. With that, I'm signing off. Lots of love to you all. Till next time. Bye.